The Pandemic app, created by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, provides a visual representation of what happens during the spread of a pandemic. There are 4 factors that affect how quickly a pandemic spreads: the population of opportunity, the number of days a person is contagious once infected, the number of people with whom the infected person has contact, and the chance of contraction whenever contact occurs between an infected person and an uninfected person. To show you how the simulation works, I'm going to leave the parameters exactly as they're laid out here and hit the Calculate button. You'll notice that the simulation recalculated, and you may have noticed that the numbers along the horizontal axis changed. Let's play the simulation and see what goes on. You may have noticed that the simulation started with only 1 person infected, but very quickly the number of infected people grows to a total of 91.6% of the entire population of opportunity. This pandemic spread very quickly. We can adjust the parameters in the simulation to get a different result. I'm going to change the population of opportunity to 20 rows and 20 columns for a total population of 400. This is obviously significantly less than the 8 billion people worldwide who could be affected by the coronavirus pandemic. As far as the other parameters, the number of days contagious I'm going to leave at 5 days. This seems to be roughly consistent with CDC data that's currently available. The number of contacts, however, I'm going to change significantly. If people are not quarantined, if they don't choose to stay home, the number of contacts per day is going to be significantly higher than 4. In fact, if folks go to school or go to work or just go out and move about town, the number of contacts they have in a particular day could be 20 or higher. As for the chance of contraction, this percentage is a little bit unknown currently, but a reasonable guess is somewhere around 2 to 3% based on current estimates. Using these parameters, let's calculate a new simulation and see what happens. On day 1, only 1 person is infected. On the second day, however, that first person is still contagious, though not newly infected, but 2 new cases have appeared. On day 3, another new case has appeared, and this continues to be the case. And by day 6, we can see that the pandemic is growing very quickly. As the days proceed, the total percentage of infected people becomes very high. By day 28, the pandemic has burned itself out, but by that point, 94% of the population has been infected. Many governors have imposed rules to close bars and restaurants, and many schools have closed so that students are not in close contact with one another. This reduces the number of contacts. Let's change the number of contacts in the simulation to see what happens when it's reduced significantly. Let's say, for instance, that all people choose to stay in their houses, and the number of contacts they have are only members of their immediate family, for which 4 seems to be a reasonable estimate. When we recalculate and run the simulation, a very different result recurs. Notice that we do have a little bit of spread that occurs. But by the 16th day, the pandemic has burned itself out, and only 1.8% of the population has been affected. This is what happens when you reduce the number of contacts. Consequently, the current rules being put in place by the CDC and other authorities is meant to flatten the curve, as they've been saying, and prevent the pandemic from spreading in the fast way that it's been going so far. I encourage you to play with this pandemic app on your own. Change the parameters as you see fit, adjust the population, and see what happens when repeated trials are attempted.